Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
On the north end of Phoenix, there's this enormous plant that had 16 or 1700 employees that were brought over from the Far East to work.
Okay.
No, not from China, from Taiwan and the other countries that have that knowledge.
Yeah.
And now we're also seeing in the Southeast United States a lot of manufacturing of high-tech goods. And that it's not helping China in any way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Samsung has a $6 billion plant coming up.
I'm sorry?
Doesn't Samsung have a $6 billion chip plant coming up in
Yeah,
or something?
I read that recently. Yeah.
I mean, that's just an amazing number.
One of the things that's interesting is that a lot of these dollars that are going toward offshore industries, if you will, are winding up the states that have had bad times,
Yeah.
like Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. The Rivian truck, which is selling very well.
Yeah, it's doing very well.
Yeah, it's being manufactured, I think, in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these states that were circling the drain are going to start coming back with the new wave, if you will.
Isn't Rivian in an old GM assembly plant?
Yeah, exactly.
I think they are in Missouri. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they are.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second. So I wanted to mention something to you, and I don't know if you saw this or not, but Gavin Newsom, our governor of California, last week was in China, and they put him in an SUV, and he was driving this Chinese SUV around, and he was remarking and bragging about how wonderful it was and all that. And it was amazing to me, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but it was amazing to me how similar that SUV looked in terms of style to the Lexus GX that's coming out next year. Fascinating. It was just fascinating to me. Anyway, it looked very similar. So let's talk for a second about India. India is the world's largest democracy, according to your book. And there are some interesting things going on in India.
Well, India is doing their darndest
to
become a first world country.
They're one of those that's making that transition.
Yeah, and they're not quite second world, but selectively. Cities like Mumbai, New Delhi are modern cities.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing a much better job now of educating their students.
Yeah.
And they have made a commitment to spend, I think it's 6% of their gross national product on advanced education. And they have an enormous number of very bright young people who, those that haven't come here for universities, are going to universities now in India.
Yeah.
And it's, I will say, it's a smart country to the extent that their IQ level across the board is pretty much like ours is. And as a result of that, they are able to get those college degrees and put them to work.
Yeah.
So India is going to move forward very steadily now, and they continue to grow. They're going to add another couple 100 million people in the next 50 years, which is sort of incredible,
Yeah.
but they will. And they also have normalized household formations, and they're moving up the chain. They have made such incredible headway in the last 30 years that it's just two different countries, if you will,
Yeah.
and they're friendly.
Yeah. They really are. They really are. So the EU and Great Britain, an economic powerhouse.
Yep. 28 countries,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them educated.
Mm-hmm.
They're all first world countries. One of the things that I find interesting is that here in the United States, our home ownership is about 65%.
Mm-hmm.
Most of their countries, they're like in the 70s and 80% plus home ownership. So they are very stable
Yeah.
from that standpoint. They're by and large very educated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few countries that are lagging there, but for the most part, they are. And their only problem is they haven't been doing the two kids.
Right.
So countries like Great Britain have been importing people now for a couple of decades,
Yeah.
very heavily from the Mideast.
Mhm.
And if you walk around London, you may not think that you're in England.
Yeah.
Um,
Isn't the
yeah,
prime minister Indian or prime minister from the Middle
yeah,
East?
yeah, partially, yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah, he's
Middle Eastern.
pretty
Oh,
pretty neat guy.
yeah.
But they uh, they have that to lean on. Some of the other countries haven't been as welcoming to foreign immigration, but need to be because
Yeah.
you have a country like Italy, which is really needs new people, but they're not letting a lot of folks in.
It sounds like Germany does too. It sounds like Germany's needing to import more people.
Yeah, well, they brought in 1 million people about 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and that has helped them keep their industries alive. And for instance, China exports over $1 billion in cars to China every year.
Hmm.
So they've got to keep that machine going
Yeah.
in Germany, and they are they're not quite workaholic, but they put out the goods,
Yeah.
and the quality of their goods is about the highest in the world.
They're about the hardest working Europeans out there, aren't they?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
At
can't
least,
mean it,
yeah,
but
just
yeah,
yeah.
uh, certainly.
Anecdotally, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly France and Italy uh, aren't really that hard workers,
Right.
or, by the way, don't produce a lot.
Yeah.
If you ask me, what do we import from France? perfume doesn't count. I guess I don't
Basically, not a
know.
lot.
Right. And Italy's the same way.
Yeah,
There's almost nothing we import
yeah,
from Italy or from Spain or from Portugal. They just are not producing as much as they should.
yeah.
Um,
Hard to
so
do
the
that.
answer,
Hard to do that when
hmm?
you take naps every day, you know?
Yeah. So the reality is that Europe, 28 countries, will continue to lose population. And, they still got a lot of people there.
Yeah,
So they're not going to dry up and blow away, but they're not going to have the robust growth that they would like to have.
gotcha. So let's talk about our favorite state where you and I are actually right now, and where we live, California. California.
Yeah.
I'm not joking when I tell you this. I learned so much in this book. My head hurt, my brain hurt. And one of the things that I learned about California was the VC investment here, and how people that are in the lower echelon as far as income and also in education are leaving the state, but the people that have MBAs and PhDs are coming here in droves. Like this top grading kind of thing happening.
Including, of course, the foreign market that's moving here.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I put it in the book, but I have an exhibit that shows the percent of population that is foreign born
Yeah. It's in there.
in the various states
Yeah.
and metropolitan areas. And the Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
almost half of the entire population is foreign born.
Yeah. And you were talking about in the indigenous population of California. You want to touch on that? The growth of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You were talking in your book, you talked about the growth of the indigenous population in California.
Um, I don't think I used that word, did I?
I think you did.
I didn't think I did.
I think I noted.
Um, but no, the foreign population here is enormous. A combination of coming from the Far East and um, really the South American countries.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, California is doing pretty well. We have the same population as Canada.
Yeah.
It's not like you write us off. We're going great. And when you look at our gross domestic product,
Mhm.
GDP,
Right.
California's we're getting there. We're fifth largest country in the world.
Yeah. We're almost
And
number 4, right?
yeah, I'm betting within the next 10 years we become number 4.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
And the answer for that is that the goods that we manufacture tend to be very expensive and very sophisticated.
Right.
So when you look at just take San Diego and take a look at the life sciences industries here,
Mhm.
it's truly remarkable
Yeah.
what comes out of here. And those industries pay exceptionally well.
Yeah.
If you go online, go to go to Google, Apple, look at the jobs that are available. There's almost nothing under 100,000 a year,
Mhm.
and most of them are like 150 a year.
Yeah.
And then I look, here in San Diego, Apple about 2 years ago bought about a 500,000 square feet of space in Rancho Bernardo,
Yeah.
and they're going to bring in thousands of workers.
Now they're planning to have 6,000 here by
Yeah,
26.
yeah. So it's pretty amazing. And then when I look at the Silicon Valley, between that and Orange County and San Diego, these are very healthy communities.
Yeah.
And if anything, their only problem is they need a lot more blue collar workers.
Yeah.
And, we've not really opened the fence enough.
Well, it's tough, when you start looking at bringing in blue collar workers and you start looking at how much it costs to live here in California versus a Florida or a Texas. And I lived, full disclosure, I lived in and worked in Florida for 9 months. And there is a distinct difference because there's no state income tax and there's much less in the way of gas tax, that kind of thing. There is a distinct difference in terms of the cost of living. Property taxes are higher. That's true. Food costs are higher. That is true. But when you start looking at the total cost of living, Florida versus California, there's a dramatic difference.
Very dramatic.
It's harder to live here. It really is, especially when you're talking blue collar type employment.
Yeah, and we have done an abysmal job of supplying housing.
Yeah, I agree with
And the state is trying. They have recently passed 4 bills that make it easier to build here, but it's not there yet. As Governor Newsom has stated, he'd like us to see putting out 300,000 homes a year here. And the reality is we barely can do 100,000.
that. Yeah,
And the state is taking a very aggressive stand on forcing metropolitan areas to develop housing.
yeah.
And perhaps one of the things, maybe the most important thing that has kept us from building affordable attached housing, townhomes, and vertical construction is there a 10-year statute of liability. So developers don't want to take a chance of being sued.
Yeah.
And you go to a place like Florida and it's a 5-year, Arizona 5-year. So our builders certainly know how to build, but they're just afraid of getting sued.
Well, they're disincentivized. That's really the honest truth. I mean, I've been in the building industry for a long time. So, and I know you have too. I know the way I initially met you was you were doing bull and bear every January, and you were always our bull. And
Right.
I just love that about you. And you changed my life. I think I shared this with you. January of 2000, you and the bear actually agreed.
Don Bowder.
Yeah, you agreed on one thing, and you hadn't agreed on anything before that. I mean, you wouldn't even agree on the color of the sky, the two of you, but you agreed on this, and that was that we were running out of permittable land in San Diego County, and I was 100% builder. Every single thing I had in terms of income was 100% builder. I didn't have anything else coming in that I was bringing in terms of business that wasn't builder. And I got a chill from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And I walked out of that room that day after listening to you and Don. I walked out of that room that day with having made a decision that I needed to diversify. And within 12 months, I owned a Keller Williams franchise in Escondido, which got me diversified. Does that make sense? So that was a big deal because I had a baby at home that was getting ready to turn 2. I had one on the way that was going to arrive June 16th, as it turned out, of 2000, right? They're now 25 and 23 years old. Okay. But back then I was the sole support for my family. That was the agreement my wife and I had, was I would work, she would stay home with the kids. We didn't want nannies or daycare people, taking care of raising our kids. we wanted her raising them. So, and so I knew I had to make some changes, and I did. I walked out of that room with an absolute decision, and it changed my life. Absolutely did, for the better. So one thing I wanted to mention to you, only because you mentioned Google and it made me think of it. I wanted to mention something to you, and I was actually going to do it off camera, but I might as well put it on the podcast. You know how we do your life story, and we got together with you a couple of months ago and did your life story, and you had done your undergrad with Maryland, and you had gone to Stanford and earned an MBA. Do you know who else did that?
Oh,
Co-founder of Google.
aha.
You and Sergey Brin have the same educational pedigree. Isn't that something?
Okay. He's
So
done
you're
fairly well
connected.
for himself.
That's something.
Yeah.
So
It's
anyway,
interesting.
so I just find that stuff, I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
stuff, the things that connect us. So
Yeah.
next up is Texas. I love Texas. All my life growing up in Oklahoma, I wanted to live in Texas. My parents ended up moving us in 1980 out to California and never left, right? Been out here 43 years. But Texas is one of my favorite places in the world. And according to your book, Texas is on fire. They're getting after it.
Yep. They are so pro-business
Yeah.
that they basically don't have any competition in the United States.
Yeah.
Just sort of amazing. Their whole government structure is aimed at economic growth.
Yeah.
And if
Also
you,
pro builder.
oh goodness, yes.
And we actually, you remember McMillan, right? Cody McMillan. So McMillan moved after he passed away. McMillan moved, the family did, to San Antonio. So we're losing builders, big builders in San Diego and in California, period, to Texas and Florida.
Well, the other thing with Texas is that they do have land.
Yeah. But I think
And
California could go to school on how to be more pro builder from Texas and Florida.
well, that wouldn't take much.
Yeah.
But Texas has a governmental structure that is aimed at economic growth.
Mhm.
And I've been tracking Texas. I've been working there, wow, since the early 70s.
Mhm.
And I've just watched this massive explosion. And yet they have accomplished that explosion of economic growth without housing prices going crazy.
Yeah.
It's still a really cheap place to live. And, they pretty much do everything right.
Mhm.
Well, obviously, I don't like their politics at the moment. But things change. And, it's sort of interesting when you look at even places like El Paso, which is not one of my favorite cities.
I'm either.
That's ranked the #1 safest city in the United States.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's very heavily military.
Yeah.
They have, I think, 4 Air Force bases there.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.